I knew the moment was coming the second he swaggered into the Monday morning meeting wearing his dead father's Rolex and a grin slicker than an oil spill. He didn't bother with introductions, just stood at the head of the table like a dollar store Caesar and started listing names. Realignment, he called it. Performance purge, his little clipboard read. When he got to mine, Cynthia Marlowe, SVP of Finance, 18 years on the books, he didn't even look up. Slacker, he muttered, pen flicking across the page like he was swatting a fly, effective immediately. The room went silent. Janice from payroll blinked so hard her fake lashes fluttered off like moths. Someone dropped a pen, and me. I stood up, smoothed the front of my jacket, and said 5 words I'd been saving for someone exactly like him. Thank you for your clarity. Then I picked up my succulent from the window ledge, took the photo of my dog wearing sunglasses from my desk drawer, and walked out without so much as a sigh. But make no mistake, I wasn't calm. Not inside. Inside, I was already reaching for the file in my mind labeled Clause 12C. You see, I didn't get to where I was by accident. And I sure as hell didn't survive 3 mergers, 2 embezzlement scandals, 1 office fire caused by Chad microwaving salmon, just to get dismissed by some nepotistic punk who still smelled like Axe body spray and hubris. And by the way, while I've got your attention, 95% of folks watching this haven't subscribed yet. Don't make me audit your moral compass. Click that button and help me hit my first 10,000 subscribers. I promise it'll be more satisfying than watching a trust fund baby dig his own career grave. Now, back to our regularly scheduled vengeance. The second I was outside, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I went straight home, made a cup of chamomile tea laced with whiskey for the antioxidants, and pulled out the manila folder I kept in a fireproof safe under my laundry room sink. It contained one document, my contract. Hand-signed by Alina Whitcomb, real iron fist behind Whitcomb Enterprises, even after her husband passed and she stepped down. And nestled deep in the legalese, like a snake in the grass, was Clause 12C. In short, if I was terminated without documented cause, a third-party forensic audit of company finances would be triggered within 72 hours. Mandatory, non-negotiable, and very, very quiet. I remember the meeting where I got that clause inserted. It was 5 years ago, just after I uncovered a 7-figure discrepancy in our South American logistics division. The founder had gone red-faced with embarrassment. Alina, on the other hand, had looked at me like a necessary evil, useful, unsentimental, and better kept inside the tent. She offered me a bonus. I asked for the clause. She raised an eyebrow. I didn't blink. She signed. And now her idiot son had handed me the perfect opportunity to activate it. I poured another drink, pulled up the email with his termination notice subject line, staff reduction notice immediate, and forwarded it to Whitcomb Legal's legacy compliance inbox. No words, just the attachment. No calls, no warnings. Let them figure out what the hell Clause 12C meant. I sat back and waited, and smiled. The contract sat on my kitchen table like a sleeping dragon. I reread it under the glow of a flickering LED bulb, the kind I always meant to replace, but never did. Page after page of legal mumbo-jumbo, NDA, non-competes, and executive protections. And then there it was again, Clause 12C. I ran my finger under the sentence like I was reading scripture. In the event of termination, without documented cause, the company shall immediately engage an independent third-party forensic audit to review all financial activities and expenditures of the preceding 24 months. I'd read it 100 times before, but this time it felt different, like a secret I'd buried just deep enough to forget, but not so deep I couldn't reach for it when the fire started. No anger, no tears, just a spreading heat in my chest that almost felt like vindication. Not victory, not yet, but the quiet power of someone holding a fuse while the dynamite is still sleeping. I didn't call Alina, didn't even text her. I knew better. She was the kind of woman who'd compliment your necklace at brunch while mentally calculating your quarterly expenses. Once, at Christmas party, she told me I reminded her of herself when she was young and still willing to climb through shit to clean house. I never knew if that was meant to be a compliment or a warning. Probably both. She never liked me. I was too capable for her to fully trust, too ambitious for her to pity, and too clean for her to destroy. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies. We were parallel predators, the kind who share a watering hole but never turn their backs. She married the founder when he was already rich. She wore pearls like armor and never said thank you unless it cost her something. And yet, 5 years ago, the board nearly dissolved over the Brazil incident. It was a leaner who pushed to keep me on, and a leaner who insisted on that clause. At the time, I assumed it was because she wanted someone loyal in finance. Now, I think she just wanted a tripwire, a canary in the coal mine, a human grenade for her idiot son, so I triggered the pin. I pulled up the termination email, saved it as PDF, attached it to a blank message, and sent it to the audit address, legacyaudit@whitcomenterprises.com. The inbox that routes directly to the outside firm we use whenever shit hits the fan, and we don't want the janitor to smell it before it's contained. I didn't add a subject line. I didn't need to. The contract did all the talking. Then I powered off my laptop, poured another drink, this time something cheap and punishing, and sat by the window as dusk crawled up the skyline. I could already hear it, the low rumble of confusion, flickering tension in a boardroom where someone's asking, "Why are auditors here?" And someone else is lying too fast to be convincing. They'd think it was routine. They'd assume it was about old invoices or compliance. For about 15 minutes, then they'd realize what it really was. A countdown. Started by the woman their new CEO had labeled a slacker. I leaned back in the chair, letting the silence settle like ash. My phone buzzed twice, coworkers, probably checking in. I didn't answer. Not yet. Not until the first whiff of smoke came curling out of the executive suite vents. I didn't want to gloat. I just wanted them to know I hadn't left quietly. I'd left precisely. The vultures arrived in silence, no warning, no board memo, no heads up to HR. 3 men in dark suits and 1 woman with a steel jaw and a clipboard that could slice drywall. They entered the Whitcomb headquarters on a foggy Wednesday morning, kind of morning that already smelled like burnt toast and coming disaster. Security let them through because their credentials checked out, and their audit request had a matching authorization code signed years ago by Alina herself. The receptionist blinked hard when they asked for direct access to expense archives and executive financial logs. "Is this about Q4?" she stammered. The tallest of them just smiled like a man holding a warrant and said, "It's about everything." Meanwhile, back at his glass-walled throne, young Whitcomb, real name Gavin, but I always called him Failson in my head, was midway through a leadership brunch when one of his lackeys leaned in and whispered something that made his eyebrow twitch. He dismissed it, of course. Probably told the team it was just compliance or some box-checking nonsense. But I know his voice cracked, because Janice from payroll texted me 2 minutes later. "Girl, auditors, your boy just spilled his mimosa." I smiled so hard I almost chipped a molar. He tried to stay composed, tried to wave them off like they were some low-level nuisance. But then came the scope. The auditors requested access to all corporate cards used by the executive team over the past 2 fiscal years. That included Gavin's discretionary innovation fund, which he'd been using like monopoly money ever since his daddy croaked. The first issue, half the receipts weren't even on file. The second, some of the ones they could find listed charges from a shell LLC called Sky Forge Partners, registered in Nevada to a P.O. box that also happened to be linked to a crypto startup Gavin kept name-dropping at golf outings. I'd flagged it once, months ago, but he'd brushed me off, said it was synergy development, which is code for bullshit someone says when they're trying to buy a Tesla with investor money. Another text buzzed in. They just asked for signed travel reimbursements. Leadership retreat Chalum. You remember that disaster? Oh, I remembered. That was the retreat Gavin insisted on hosting 3 weeks after layoffs. Said the team needed spiritual alignment. Booked a luxury resort with hot stone massages and a tequila tasting for C-levels. Billed it all under training. I had raised hell about it in the meeting notes. Guess what wasn't in the system? The meeting notes. The best part, was when I found out who was leading the audit team. His name was Dominic Crane, my old intern from 2011. Back then, he was fresh out of college with too much hair and not enough fear. I trained him like a drill sergeant with a hangover. He once cried after I made him redo a report 3 times because he used inconsistent formatting on the spreadsheet headers. I used to tell him, if you're going to survive in finance, numbers have to be cleaner than your soul. Well, guess who grew up to become one of the youngest forensic auditors at Willoughby and Sloan? Guess who now walked the halls of Whitcomb with a flash drive full of bad decisions and a half smirk I recognized instantly from the corner of a blurry photo someone sent me? Dominic Crane was in the building, and I didn't have to lift a finger. I poured myself a coffee, opened my blinds, watched the sun try its best to break through the clouds. My phone kept vibrating. People wanted answers. They wanted to know if I'd done something, if I was behind this. I wasn't behind it, I was it. The whispers started around the espresso machine, right between someone's second oat milk latte and someone else's nervous hiccup. Why was Cynthia let go again? Something about performance. She was here 18 years. Doesn't make sense. Someone else chimed in. Didn't she uncover the Peru logistics thing? A pause, sip, silence, and then, so what the hell are the auditors looking for? By noon, the office floor hummed with the sound of passive-aggressive typing and thinly veiled suspicion. People were slacking screenshots of weird transactions. A PDF expense report for a consulting session, $12,400 at a cigar lounge in Vegas, started making the rounds. Labeled under innovation coaching. Meanwhile, Gavin was unraveling like a clearance bin Christmas sweater. He stormed through the corridors like a suburban dad whose HOA just cited him for lawn gnomes. Kicked open his own office door at one point, then slammed it so hard the frame cracked. Canceled the weekly board update with a single Slack message. Postponed until further notice. Will reschedule when priorities align. Translation. Mom's not picking up. I don't know what Dominic Crane has found yet. By 3:00 p.m., 2 interns in marketing were gossiping so loud they forgot the printer was still jammed next to them. I heard she had a clause in her contract, like a nuclear clause. Like, legal stuff? No, like audit apocalypse level. What even is a forensic audit? I dunno, but it's been crying. From my perch at home, I watched it all unravel in real time, fed to me through a drip Roman 4 of texts, Slack leaks, and one very anxious voicemail from a former coworker who begged me not to quote her. Sin, please tell me you're behind this. Because if you're not, we're really screwed. Flashbacks came in waves. Gavin laughing too loud at investor dinners, bragging about strategic flexibility and how his father was old school. The day he walked into my office chewing gum, dropped a $60,000 invoice on my desk from Blue Fang Consulting, and said, just run this through discretionary. They helped us design our brand story. The invoice had a description that read, Emotional Branding Brainstorm plus Goat Yoga Alignment. I had stared at him like he'd farted in church. Gavin, I said, that's not a business expense. He winked, not with that attitude. That was 8 months ago. I flagged it, buried it in my notes, told myself it wasn't my hill to die on. Now it was the whole mountain catching fire. The best part? Nobody outside the building knew, yet. The shareholders were still blissfully unaware. The press hadn't sniffed it. Even the financial forums hadn't gotten wind. It was like watching a volcano rumble under the surface while tourists took selfies at the edge. And me? I sat with my legs crossed, phone face down, inbox glowing with unread messages. One from Alina, unread. Another from Dominic, marked requesting context. I didn't open that one either. Not yet. Let them stew. Let them wonder how deep it goes. Let the boys sweat. Because I wasn't done, not even close. I hadn't even opened my own files yet. The call came at 6:37 a.m., before the sun had fully crawled up the sky, before my coffee pot had finished its first gurgling breath. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the last executive holiday party, back when Gavin was still pretending to be a visionary, and I was still pretending to like his signature cocktail. A Negroni with Red Bull. Alina Whitcomb, the chairwoman emeritus, the Iron Widow. The woman who once said, gratitude is a luxury women in power can't afford. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. Cynthia. Her voice was clipped, precise, like someone slicing string cheese with a scalpel. She didn't bother with good morning. Didn't ask how I was. I think we need to talk. I waited a beat. About what exactly? A pause. I could almost hear the pearls rattling in her throat. Not over the phone. Of course not. Alina never said anything over a wire she wouldn't say in court. I leaned against the kitchen counter, absently brushing crumbs from a stale croissant into the sink. My brain wanted to snap something back. How you want to talk? After your son called me a slacker and tried to erase 18 years with one meeting and a damn clipboard. But I didn't, because I knew what that call really meant. She had seen the audit, not all of it, just the edge. Just enough to know the iceberg went deep. Just enough to realize the idiot she'd handed the wheel to had steered the whole damn ship toward a fiscal glacier. I know a place, she said, gave the name of a boutique hotel cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. Quiet, expensive, full of elderly women who played bridge and young executives pretending not to be nervous. 10 o'clock, she said, then hung up. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My jaw was clenched, not from anger, not exactly. Old wounds have strange muscle memory. She'd never liked me, never disliked me either. I was a tool to her, well-oiled scalpel she could use to carve the fat off her late husband's empire. But I was never the daughter-in-law she wanted for Gavin, never the mentee she bragged about at charity luncheons. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't socialite enough. I was numbers and grit, sarcasm and survival, and she never forgave me for making myself indispensable. When the founder was alive, he once called me reliable as stone. She heard it. I saw the look on her face, like I'd stolen an heirloom without touching a thing. From that day on, I was tolerated. Not trusted, not loved, just tolerated. But she didn't tolerate incompetence. Not for long, so when she called, I knew it wasn't remorse. It was war prep. At 10:03 a.m., I walked into the cafe wearing a gray blazer and carrying no documents. Alina was already seated, black coffee untouched, gloves laid neatly beside a copy of The Economist that I'd bet she hadn't read. She looked older. Not weaker, just more preserved, like porcelain that could still shatter if dropped wrong. We didn't hug, we didn't smile. "You're punctual," she said, eyes scanning my face like I was a quarterly report. "You're not," I said. "You called 3 days too late." She didn't flinch. Just folded her hands and said, "I've read the preliminary findings." I waited. She blinked once. "Gavin is not prepared," I snorted. "To run a lemonade stand, maybe." That earned the tiniest twitch at the corner of her mouth. "He has made some unfortunate decisions." "You don't say." Another pause. She wasn't trying to apologize. She was testing the air, weighing how much I already knew versus what she could still control. "Tell me, Cynthia," she said finally. "What would you do next?" I sipped my coffee. Burned my tongue, didn't blink. I'd wait and watch, see who you call after this. She didn't speak for a moment, just stared. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. "You were never his favorite," she said, "but you were always mine." And that's when I knew Gavin was as good as gone. She just needed a scalpel. I didn't agree to anything, but I didn't say no. I left the cafe with my hands empty and my mind racing. Because the thing about being underestimated for 18 years is, people forget what happens when you stop playing nice. It started with a single red flag in Dominic's audit report, highlighted, underlined, and flagged 3 times for urgency. Crypto payments. More specifically, over $800,000 wired to a Cayman-based holding account registered under a consulting group named Novo Hatch Global Strategies. The problem? That account didn't exist before Gavin became CEO. The bigger problem, Gavin listed it as a legacy vendor from his father's tenure. And the biggest, most oh god we're cooked problem. The payments were approved with digital signatures from people who had left the company 2 years earlier. That was the match. What followed was the dry kindling catching fire. Staff, probably the same ones Gavin barked at, dismissed, humiliated, began forwarding anonymous packets to the auditors. PDF after PDF of sketchy expense memos, reimbursements for creative retreats, and meal receipts that included Wagyu steaks and $400 bottles of wine for mentorship dinners with a startup founder who, it turned out, was Gavin's college roommate and part-time DJ. One leak included a scanned sticky note taped to a monitor in legal's office that read, "Don't approve GW. S Cayman stuff without checking W/E Alina." So someone had raised a flag. Someone had ignored it. On Friday morning, a post appeared on the Financial T, a gossip blog usually reserved for bankrupt startups, tech firings, and Silicon Valley implosions. Whitcomb exec under scrutiny. Anonymous sources say the books aren't balancing. It was short, vague, and packed with enough implication to make every investor in a 3-state radius spit out their espresso. I was mid-sip myself when the email hit my inbox. "Sin, this wasn't supposed to go public yet. Call me, Dominic. Too late, Dom." The press might have only scratched the surface, but the stock group chats exploded. Speculation hit Reddit. "Is Whitcomb another Theranos?" one genius asked. "Crypto laundering through legacy accounts," another suggested. People posted their own screenshots of business lunches and called out execs by name. And suddenly, it wasn't just Gavin in the hot seat. Whole board was fielding calls from institutional investors. Emergency meetings were scheduled, then rescheduled, then quietly canceled. No one wanted to be on the record. No one wanted to be holding the matchbook when the flames reached the lobby. I sat alone at home in my living room that still smelled faintly of the vanilla candle I burned every Sunday, watching the news ticker scroll under a financial analyst's talking head. I should have felt glee, triumphant, vengeful. Instead, I felt sad, not for Gavin. He deserved every public crucifixion coming his way, but for the company we'd all built before his daddy died and handed him the keys. Whitcomb had been messy, sure, but it was ours. A machine with history, with grit, with people who gave a damn. People who stayed late and scrubbed the financials clean not because they were told to, but because their names were on it. Now, it was going to be remembered for this. For him. Goat yoga receipts and crypto scams in the Caymans. I didn't want to burn it all down. I just wanted the mold scraped out. But fire spreads fast when no one's paying attention to the smoke. And now, I had a decision to make. Let the fire finish what I started or step back in and control the burn. The invitation arrived in the form of an embossed envelope slipped under my door. No email, no assistant, no ping me when you get a sec. Just paper. Heavy, ivory stock. My name, handwritten in a script I recognized instantly, Aliner's. Inside, a single card, emergency board session. 9:00 a.m. Executive suite, 42nd floor. Attendance confidential. Notably missing any CC to Gavin Whitcomb. I didn't RSVP, didn't have to. Aliner knew I'd come, if not out of duty, then curiosity. The next morning, I arrived in a navy blazer and my lowest heels, ones that let me walk without sound. The building buzzed with hushed chaos, like a funeral reception where no one was sure if they were mourning or celebrating. On the 42nd floor, a security guard opened the frosted glass door without a word. Inside, 7 board members sat around the long walnut table, each looking like they hadn't slept since Tuesday. At the head sat Aliner, flanked by 2 legal advisors and a thermos of tea she hadn't touched. She nodded once. Thank you for coming. No mention of Gavin, no small talk. The presentation was already set up. Dominic's team had compiled a preliminary audit summary, and it wasn't pretty. Every page projected on the screen dripped with quiet damnation. Unauthorized crypto transfers, falsified reimbursements, vendor payments without any traceable deliverables. Many of these, Aliner said crisply, appear to post-date my son's appointment as CEO. No one interrupted. Then she turned to me. We need stability and speed. I'm asking you to step in, interim executive oversight, full discretion. No red tape, it wasn't a question. But I answered anyway. No, her brows lifted a fraction. The room stirred. Someone coughed nervously. I'm not here to clean Gavin's vomit off the rug, I said. Not unless I'm allowed to replace the furniture. One of the board members chuckled, then tried to mask it with a cough. Another, Harold, one who always smelled like pipe tobacco and quarterly losses, leaned forward. We'll authorize full operational authority, he said. Aliner's already drafted the motion. Still, I hesitated, because even with everything they'd shown me, even with the press circling and the scent of scorched reputation in the air, there was a part of me that didn't want back in. Until my phone buzzed, a single message. No sender, no text, just an image, a screenshot. Group chat labeled Whit Bros, exec life money pill. Gavin, Cynthia's gone, took her plant and her sad little file cabinet. Elmau told you finance was dead weight. Another message below, she probably cried in her Prius. I stared at it for a long moment. My blood didn't boil, it chilled, settled. Then I stood. I'll take the role, I said, effective immediately. Aliner gave the faintest of nods. Welcome back, but I wasn't done. I walked to the screen, the remote from Dominic, and pulled up a separate folder I had brought, my own records. Before we begin, I have one more vendor to add to the review list, I said. Gavin approved a Q2 payout labeled Marketing Retreat Iceland. Except no one went. The airline ticket numbers belonged to 2 models from Instagram, and the Airbnb receipt links to a villa owned by someone with the last name Whitcomb. The room went dead quiet. I'm not here to be quiet, I said. I'm here to be precise. Then I took my seat at the head of the table, not beside Aliner, in her place. The conference room lights were dimmed just enough to make the glowing red highlights on the audit report look like fresh blood. Screens lined the wall in 3 tiers, each loaded with spreadsheets, flagged transactions, and photo receipts that didn't match dates, vendors, or reality. One board member leaned forward, squinting like if he stared hard enough. Maybe the numbers would rearrange themselves into something less damning. I walked in mid-sentence. They had started without me. Mistake. Aliner was seated at the side this time, silent, letting them circle the problem like buzzards with clipboards. She didn't even flinch when I stepped to the front. She just tilted her head slightly, as if to say, go on then. So I did. No need to recap, I said. loud enough to slice the room's tension in half. Not in the speculation phase anymore. We're in the triage. All eyes shifted. I clicked the remote. The main screen changed. Case ID, GW0029 vendor. Novo Hatch Global Strategies total. $327,900. No proof of deliverables. First transaction hit 3 days after Gavin was installed as CEO. Labeled as blockchain architecture development. No work was produced. Company doesn't even have an IT department capable of integrating blockchain. Click. Next slide. Case ID, GW0174 expense. $14,320 location. Reykjavik, Iceland listed as Q2 marketing strategy. Retreat. No calendar invites. No itinerary. Flight manifests match 2 Instagram models with direct ties to a brand Gavin's been privately investing in, listed under a shell corp, traced back to a Whitcomb family trust. I let the silence settle like a fog. One board member cleared his throat. Are we looking at criminal liability here? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Right on cue, the doors slammed open. Gavin. He strode in, red-faced and twitchy, with an intern trailing behind him like a confused duckling. What the hell is going on? He barked. Why am I not on this calendar? Why is she standing there like she's in charge? I turned slowly, let him see my badge, the one a leaner had reinstated, the one labeled Executive Oversight. He froze. You can't. I can. Then I turned back to the board. There's one more thing you should know, I said, ignoring his presence like a stubborn draft. If you sit on this, if you pretend this is isolated, you're all on the hook. The bylaws were revised after the Argentina incident. The executive transactions not investigated post-complaint put the entire board at legal and fiduciary risk. Now the fear started to bloom. Some of you signed off on Gavin's innovation fund. Some of you approved reimbursements you didn't verify. If this goes to the public prosecutor, and it might, you're all going to be asked the same question. What did you know, and when did you choose to stay silent? Gavin stepped forward. This is character assassination. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under. I turned to him, expression flat as marble. Funny. I thought that was your brand, pressure. Performance under pressure, wasn't it? Or was it just performance? He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. One last slide, I said. Click. Case ID, GW0190, $58,000 payout shell vendor. Centric Strategies recipient, unknown. Routing number masked. This is still open, I said. Payment was flagged. No business address. Routing info scrubbed, but preliminary traces link it to a personal account. Not Gavin's. Every head in the room turned. I let the silence breathe. Then, it links to someone sitting at this table. A beat, too. Then I stepped back, not to leave, just to let them stew, because the climax hadn't landed. Not yet. I didn't want to use it. That clause was the last bullet in a gun I'd hoped I'd never have to fire. Dusty relic from the founder's paranoia during the 2008 collapse. It had a name that sounded more like a Cold War directive than a corporate policy. Clause 17E, Executive Emergency Override. Hidden in the legal appendix, known only to a handful of surviving executives. One of them being me. It stated, word for word, that any executive with over 10 years of service and a direct link to financial compliance operations would temporarily freeze all C-suite privileges and suspend operational authority if financial harm to the company is imminent and corroborated by audit data. It was signed by the founder himself, in fountain pen, with a whiskey stain in the margin, so I printed it, walked into the room, and laid it flat on the table. Clause 17E, I said, signed by William Whitcomb, active, enforceable, and as of 5 minutes ago, invoked. Gavin started to laugh. You're kidding. That's not even it is, Alina said, cutting him off with a tone colder than marble. And it holds. He turned to her, jaw slack. Mom, but she didn't say a word. Just picked up the executive order form, initialed the top, and signed the bottom in 3 fluid strokes. Her pen didn't shake. Her eyes never met his. Effective immediately, she said. Gavin Whitcomb is suspended from all company operations pending final audit results. The room went still, like glass right before it shatters. Security didn't drag him out. They didn't need to. A compliance officer, tall, silent, merciless, stepped in and stood by the door with an envelope and a badge scanner. Gavin froze, looked around for lifeline. Found none. I built this place, he hissed at me. I tilted my head. You inherited it, then you hollowed it out. He stepped toward me, close enough that I could see the panic under his cologne. You think they'll trust you, he said, voice raw. You're just a numbers rat with a grudge. I leaned in. No, Gavin, I'm a numbers surgeon, and you've been bleeding this company dry for months. He was escorted out 5 minutes later, past the same receptionist who'd watched me walk out with a potted plant and a pink slip, past the interns who'd overheard his group chat jabs, past the conference room where his strategic retreats had become boardroom jokes. And as he passed the glass double doors, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, not out of cruelty, out of closure. Then I turned back to the boardroom, picked up the tablet, and began clicking through accounts like a surgeon prepping for triage. We have 2 weeks, I said, to plug the holes before the shareholders realize how close this ship came to sinking. No one argued. No one blinked. They just nodded and followed. Alina stood last. She paused at the door, looked back, and said, "Fix it or finish it." Then she left me alone with the mess. I stared out the window, watching the city blink awake. I'd won. I had control. But all victories come with receipts. The game was over. Now came the audit. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.